It all started with a single post, one that no one could have predicted would ignite such chaos. Within minutes, social media was flooded with whispers linking Mendeecees, Yandy, and Sierra in a story that felt too dramatic to be real, but too believable to ignore. Screenshots, old photos, and cryptic captions began circulating across every platform, creating a storm of speculation that seemed to grow stronger by the hour. What began as harmless gossip quickly transformed into a wildfire of accusations and emotional turmoil. Fans dissected every facial expression, every word, every emoji these three had ever shared online. A harmless throwback photo from years ago suddenly became proof, while a random like or comment became evidence of betrayal. The algorithms did their job too well, pushing the story to millions and framing it as a saga of love, loyalty, and lies. Yandy's silence added fuel to the blaze. Her absence online felt intentional, like a quiet scream. Mendeecees, on the other hand, tried to carry on as usual, posting business updates and family moments, but his usual smile seemed forced, and everyone noticed. Sierra's name started trending next, and though she hadn't said a word, her old posts mysteriously reappeared in people's feeds, with captions that now felt suspiciously symbolic. People dug up every possible clue, connecting timelines and cross-referencing photos as if they were solving a true crime mystery. The tension between Mendeecees and Yandy became a public spectacle, analyzed through the lens of strangers who claimed to know their hearts better than they did. It wasn't long before blogs picked up the story, adding sensational headlines that only deepened the chaos. Fans took sides Team Yandy or Team Mendeecees, and the comment sections turned into emotional battlefields. Some defended Yandy's dignity and pain, while others questioned Mendeecees' loyalty, citing his sudden quietness as a sign of guilt. The more they denied, the more people speculated, feeding an endless loop of attention and doubt. In the middle of all this, Sierra remained the most mysterious. Her name was being dragged through trending hashtags, yet she said nothing. The silence made her either an innocent victim or a secret villain, depending on who you asked. The emotional weight of the situation was unbearable for those involved, but to the outside world, it was pure entertainment, a real-life drama playing out in real time. As the storm grew, one truth became clear. This was no longer a private matter. The internet had turned someone's heartbreak into a public obsession, and there was no going back. By the end of the first night, 3 lives had been changed forever, their reputations hanging in the balance of trending hashtags and viral opinions. No one knew what was real, but everyone had an opinion. And as new details began to surface, one haunting question echoed across every timeline: who was telling the truth, and who was hiding it? Behind closed doors, away from the flashing screens and endless notifications, Yandy finally broke her silence. It wasn't in front of a camera or a crowd. It was in a dimly lit room filled with tension, where every second of silence felt like a lifetime. Mendeecees sat across from her, his arms folded, his eyes searching hers for an explanation that he both feared and needed to hear. The air was heavy, not with anger but with disappointment, the kind that only comes from someone you've loved deeply. Yandy took a deep breath before speaking, her voice trembling as if she was about to confess a secret that had been burning inside her for far too long. She admitted there were things she hadn't been honest about, that emotions had blurred lines she thought she could control. Mendeecees didn't interrupt. He just stared, his face frozen, processing every word like a punch to the gut. For years, they had shared everything: dreams, struggles, victories, and now, those same memories were being rewritten in real time. Yandy's confession wasn't just about what happened, but why it happened. She spoke about loneliness, distance, and how fame had turned their love into a performance. Somewhere between the filtered photos and perfect captions, they had lost the real connection. Mendeecees felt betrayed, not just by what she had done, but by how long she had kept it from him. Still, a small part of him understood the emptiness she described because he had felt it too. When she finally mentioned Sierra's name, the room went silent again. Mendeecees blinked, his heart pounding, unable to comprehend how someone who had once been part of their circle was now tangled in the middle of their pain. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the humiliation. Knowing the world already had opinions before he even knew the full truth. Yandy's tears flowed freely now, but Mendeecees couldn't bring himself to comfort her. Not yet. His mind replayed moments that suddenly seemed suspicious, the late replies, the vague explanations, the way she avoided eye contact when certain topics came up. Everything clicked, painfully, one piece at a time. Yet even through the anger, there was heartbreak. Because despite everything, he still loved her. And that made it worse. He wanted to yell, to demand answers, to escape the weight of it all, but he couldn't. Instead, he stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the city lights flickering like reminders of the chaos waiting outside. Yandy's voice broke the silence one last time as she whispered, "I never wanted to hurt you." But it was too late, the damage had already been done. Mendeecees finally turned to her, his voice cold but fragile, asking the question that had haunted him from the start. Was it ever real? She didn't answer, just lowered her eyes, knowing any response would only deepen the wound. That moment, raw, painful, and unfiltered, was the beginning of their unraveling. The private confession meant to heal had instead shattered what little trust remained. Outside that room, the world kept spinning, hashtags kept trending, and fans kept guessing. But inside those four walls, two people who once promised forever were now standing on opposite sides of the truth. And as the night faded into morning, one thing was clear: love, once broken by secrets, can never return to what it was. While Mendeecees and Yandy struggled to hold their world together, Sierra's name was quietly becoming the centerpiece of every conversation online. She hadn't said a word publicly, but somehow her silence spoke louder than any statement could. Every post she had ever made was suddenly under a microscope: old selfies, captions about loyalty, and vague quotes about truth always finding its way out. To her followers, these posts now carried new meaning. Some believed she was dropping hints, while others thought she was an innocent woman dragged into a mess she didn't create. But the timing of everything was too perfect to ignore. Just days before the rumors exploded, Sierra had uploaded a story showing a sonogram photo with no context, no caption, and no tag. The image disappeared within minutes, but not before fans screenshot it and began to connect the dots. Was it real? Was it old? Or was it a message meant for someone specific? Her decision not to clarify only added more layers to the mystery. Theories began multiplying like wildfire. Some said she was the reason Yandy's confession had come out in the first place, claiming she had threatened to expose the truth if Yandy didn't. Others suggested she was being framed entirely, that she was a pawn in a larger game meant to destroy Mendeecees' reputation. Whatever the truth was, Sierra kept playing her cards close to her chest. She posted a cryptic line one evening, "You can't hide from what's already written," and within an hour, the internet erupted. Comment sections filled with accusations, sympathy, and wild speculation. Bloggers zoomed in on her every move: what brand she wore, which songs she played in her car, and even who she followed or unfollowed that day. The attention was suffocating, yet Sierra never deleted a post. She let the chaos unfold as if watching a storm she knew was inevitable. For Mendeecees and Yandy, her silence was the most painful part. It left them wondering whether she was protecting herself or waiting for the perfect moment to speak. Inside their circle, mutual friends were cutting ties, picking sides, or pretending not to know anything. The industry began whispering too, and what had once been private heartbreak turned into public entertainment. Sierra became both villain and victim, admired for her composure, hated for her mystery. No one could decide which version of her was real. As days passed, her cryptic tone continued, each word crafted like bait for a curious world desperate for answers. Every time she posted, millions watched, waiting for the truth to finally slip through her silence. And yet it never did. Instead, her refusal to explain became her greatest power. She turned mystery into control, and in a scandal built on noise, Sierra's quietness became the loudest sound of all. After that night of confession, everything between Mendeecees and Yandy shifted. The air between them was no longer filled with love or anger, it was just empty. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly turned into brief exchanges or awkward silences. They moved around the same house like strangers, sharing space but not connection. Mendeecees threw himself into work, posting business updates and pretending everything was fine. But the exhaustion behind his smile told another story. Yandy, on the other hand, stopped posting altogether. Her social media, once a stream of joyful family moments, became completely silent. That silence spoke volumes to fans, who began analyzing every absence and every untagged photo like detectives piecing together a mystery. The more they tried to stay private, the more public curiosity grew. Blogs began writing headlines like, "Are Mendeecees and Yandy over?" And "Yandy's silence speaks the truth," adding more pressure to an already fragile situation. Every scroll on social media reminded them that their personal pain was now global gossip. Mendeecees found himself staring at old photos, remembering the laughter that once filled the spaces now haunted by tension. Yandy noticed it too, but didn't know how to reach him anymore. The emotional distance between them felt heavier than any physical wall could ever be. At night, the silence grew louder. The same bed they once shared now felt like a battlefield, Mendeecees facing one side, Yandy the other, both awake, both pretending to sleep. Sometimes she'd start to speak, but her voice would fade before any words could escape. She feared anything she said would only make things worse. Mendeecees, too, was trapped between love and resentment. He wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation that would make it all make sense, but deep down, he already knew there was no answer that could heal what was broken. Meanwhile, the outside world kept watching. Every time Mendeecees appeared alone at an event, the headlines screamed about a breakup. When Yandy was seen without her ring, screenshots went viral within minutes. Strangers began forming opinions, picking sides, and judging choices they didn't understand. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was judgment disguised as entertainment. In their home, silence became the new language. Texts went unanswered, dinners were skipped, and apologies were swallowed instead of spoken. Mendeecees started sleeping on the couch more often, telling himself it was temporary, just to clear his head. Yandy noticed but didn't stop him. She was too drained to fight. Every corner of their house reminded them of what they had lost: the couch where they planned their future, the kitchen where they shared midnight snacks, the hallway where they once laughed over nothing. Now those memories hurt more than they healed. Even their friends noticed the shift. Invitations slowed down. Calls became rare. People didn't know how to approach them anymore, afraid to say the wrong thing. Mendeecees and Yandy were trapped in an invisible war of pride and pain, both hoping the other would make the first move, yet too wounded to try themselves. The love that once held them together now felt like a ghost, lingering in every unspoken word. And as the silence stretched longer, the distance between them became something even deeper, an unbreakable wall built not from anger, but from heartbreak. Once the rumors had escaped the bounds of social media, the story became unstoppable. Entertainment blogs, gossip channels, and celebrity podcasts all jumped at the chance to dissect every fragment of Mendeecees, Yandy, and Sierra's tangled situation. Within hours, headlines like "Love Triangle Gone Wrong" and "The Betrayal That Broke the Internet" flooded timelines. Clips of old interviews were pulled out of context, re-edited, and re-uploaded as proof of guilt or innocence. Everyone wanted a piece of the chaos. YouTubers filmed hour-long breakdowns filled with theories, while podcasts debated who was really at fault. Fans became self-proclaimed detectives, creating timelines, analyzing Instagram likes, and screenshotting deleted comments as if building a criminal case. Each new rumor was treated as gospel until the next one appeared. Even verified accounts began weighing in, turning the story from a private heartbreak into a full-blown public spectacle. Yandy's old videos about loyalty resurfaced and were twisted into evidence of hypocrisy. Mendeecees' motivational posts were mocked as damage control. And Sierra, with her silence, was painted as either the mastermind or the victim, depending on which side you listened to. The situation spun so fast that no one could keep up with what was real anymore. For fans who had followed Mendeecees and Yandy for years, the betrayal felt personal. People tweeted about how their relationship had inspired them, how it gave them hope that love could survive fame, and now they felt betrayed too. Others reveled in the drama, treating it like a live TV show that refreshed every hour with new twists. Hashtags like Team Yandy and Team Mendeecees trended simultaneously, turning heartbreak into a global debate. Brands that once worked with the couple began quietly distancing themselves, pausing campaigns and deleting old posts. The media pressure was crushing, but the emotional damage was worse. Mendeecees couldn't go online without seeing his name dragged through every headline. Yandy couldn't scroll without being reminded of the public humiliation that her private confession had caused. Even people who knew nothing about them had opinions, and the internet was relentless in demanding updates. Some claimed to have inside sources, spreading lies for clicks. Others begged Yandy to tell her side, not realizing that every word she said would only feed the fire. The noise was deafening. Mendeecees tried to stay silent, but silence online only fuels curiosity. Fans began reading between the lines of his captions, convinced each post contained a hidden message. When he shared a photo with the words, "still standing," it sparked hundreds of comments arguing about whether it was aimed at Yandy or Sierra. The truth no longer mattered, only the narrative that got the most engagement did. What made it worse was how easily the internet turned empathy into entertainment. Every tear, every pause, every quiet moment between posts became part of the show. The couple's pain was now public property, discussed, judged, and monetized. And as the media storm raged on, it became clear that this wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a story people didn't want to end. For the internet, it was content. For Mendeecees and Yandy, it was real life. And every headline cut a little deeper. The breaking point came one late evening when a leaked audio clip surfaced online. It was grainy, emotional, and raw, two voices arguing. One of them unmistakably Mendeecees, the other sounding heartbreakingly like Yandy. Within minutes, it spread across every platform. The clip captured fragments of a private argument, snippets that painted a picture of betrayal, pain, and confrontation. No one knew who recorded it, but it didn't matter. The world finally had something concrete to feed on, and by the next morning, the clip had millions of views and endless commentary videos dissecting every word. Mendeecees woke up to chaos. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing, and his name was trending again, but this time with words like liar and exposed attached to it. When he finally played the clip himself, his heart dropped. Hearing his own anger thrown into the public felt like reliving the worst night of his life. Except now everyone was watching. Yandy, on the other hand, was shattered. The conversation had been private, a desperate moment between two people trying to make sense of heartbreak, never meant for the world to hear. Yet there it was played, looped, and judged by strangers. The betrayal wasn't just between them anymore. It was between them and the public that refused to let their wounds heal. Later that day, Mendeecees went live on his account. His voice was calm, but his eyes told a different story. He didn't deny the clip. Instead, he said, "You think you know everything, but you only know what you're shown." It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. He explained that the clip had been twisted, that emotions were high, and that sometimes pain makes people say things they don't mean. The internet didn't care. Comments flooded in, half supporting him, half accusing him of manipulation. Every sentence became a headline, every pause a meme. Meanwhile, Yandy remained silent for nearly 2 days. When she finally posted, it wasn't a statement or a video, it was a simple note on a black background. Truth doesn't need to scream. That one line broke the internet again. Some said she was claiming innocence. Others saw it as defiance. Sierra's name was dragged right back into the storm as people began suggesting she might have been the one to leak the clip. Her silence became even more suspicious. Blogs claimed to have insider details, hinting that Sierra and Yandy had met secretly before everything went public, though no one could prove it. What was once an emotional conflict between 3 people had now turned into a full-blown investigation by millions of strangers. Mendeecees felt trapped, damned if he spoke, damned if he didn't. His closest friends advised him to stay offline, but the damage had already been done. Every attempt to defend himself looked like guilt, and every silence was seen as an admission. The trust that once defined his relationship with Yandy was gone, replaced by a painful mix of resentment and longing. Even as he scrolled through the hate comments, what hurt most wasn't the judgment. It was the realization that somewhere in the noise, their love had become unrecognizable. For Yandy, the betrayal was layered. It wasn't just about what Mendeecees had done or what Sierra may have known. It was about how quickly the world had taken their private story and rewritten it without mercy. She watched strangers debate her pain as if it were fiction. At one point, an old clip of Mendeecees praising her in an interview resurfaced, and fans flooded her comments with heartbreak emojis, calling it the moment before the storm. But behind her silence, Yandy was fighting to hold herself together. Every time she tried to explain, her PR team reminded her that words could be twisted, so she said nothing. The truth, she realized, wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. It was about surviving the noise. Mendeecees eventually deleted his live video, posting only one final message before disappearing from social media for weeks. "You can't fix what people enjoy breaking." That line summed up everything: the love, the betrayal, and the painful truth that sometimes the world doesn't want clarity. It wants chaos. And in that chaos, their story became everyone's entertainment, but their own healing. As the leaked clip continued to dominate headlines, Sierra's silence became the most powerful weapon in the entire scandal. She didn't post. She didn't comment. She didn't even like anything, just vanished from the digital world. And yet her name never stopped trending. Fans began to treat her silence as strategy, analyzing every absence like it was a clue. "She's waiting for the right moment," one fan tweeted. "She's guilty in hiding," said another. Both theories went viral. Meanwhile, gossip accounts started claiming that Sierra was negotiating an exclusive interview to set the record straight, though no proof ever surfaced. The uncertainty was maddening. Every day she stayed quiet, the speculation grew louder. People went back to her old videos, searching for hidden meanings in her laughter, body language, even her clothes. One clip of her saying, "I don't chase, I attract," resurfaced, now viewed as a confession in disguise. Fan pages began dividing into groups, those who saw her as the mastermind behind the chaos, and those who painted her as a woman unfairly caught in the crossfire of Mendeecees and Yandy's broken relationship. The irony was that Sierra herself never confirmed or denied a single thing. But that didn't stop others from speaking for her. Anonymous sources claimed she had evidence that could change everything. Some said she was pregnant, others swore she had moved on with someone new. The more outlandish the theory, the faster it spread. By now, Sierra's silence wasn't seen as weakness, it was power. The world was addicted to the mystery she represented. Mendeecees' fans begged her to speak up and clear his name, while Yandy's supporters accused her of hiding guilt behind quiet elegance. And the longer she said nothing, the more she controlled the narrative without even trying. Then, just when the noise reached its peak, Sierra broke her silence, but not in the way anyone expected. She posted a single photo, a blurry sunset with the caption, "Not everything deserves an explanation." No tags, no comments, no context. That post hit harder than any statement could have. The internet exploded with interpretations, each one wilder than the last. Some saw peace, others saw arrogance. Within hours, the photo had millions of likes and thousands of theories beneath it. And just like that, Sierra disappeared again, deleting the post days later and leaving behind only screenshots and confusion. Her quietness became legend, her mystery now larger than the scandal itself. The internet had built her into both the villain and the victim, and she didn't need to do a thing to keep that power. In a world that demanded constant explanations, Sierra's silence became her crown, and the louder everyone screamed for answers, the more she reminded them that silence too can tell a story. After the chaos, the leaks, and the endless online noise, everything finally went quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the silence that follows an explosion, where everything looks still on the surface, but the damage runs deep underneath. Mendeecees had vanished from social media, Yandy had stopped taking calls, and Sierra had retreated into her private world. The digital battlefield they had been forced onto finally emptied out, but the emotional wreckage remained. Mendeecees spent days in isolation, replaying everything in his head, every message, every argument, every red flag he had ignored. The truth no longer mattered. What haunted him most was how he had let things fall apart. He had always thought love could survive anything, but now he realized love alone wasn't enough when trust had been broken beyond repair. Yandy, meanwhile, moved differently. She stayed off the internet, ignored her phone, and focused on small routines just to keep her mind steady. Making coffee, walking around the block, folding clothes, tiny actions that reminded her she still existed outside the noise. But inside, she was crumbling. She missed Mendeecees even after everything. The memories they had built together kept flashing in her mind, the laughter, the plans, the late-night talks. She hated that the same love that once healed her now hurt the most. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was him, even though she knew he wouldn't call. She thought about apologizing again, but what was left to say? Some wounds don't want words, they want time, and even time felt cruel. Mendeecees tried to stay strong, but the loneliness hit him harder than the betrayal. He started seeing Yandy everywhere, in songs, in street signs, in the smell of her perfume that still lingered on his clothes. He wanted to move on, but his heart refused. He posted nothing online, but every night he scrolled through old pictures they had taken, his thumb hovering over the delete button, unable to press it. The public had moved on to new gossip, but for them, the pain was permanent. Sierra, too, felt the weight of it all. Though she had kept silent, the constant speculation had taken a toll on her. Friends began avoiding her, brands withdrew collaborations, and people treated her like a symbol rather than a human being. Even when she wasn't guilty of anything, she was still blamed for everything. In a way, they had all lost their peace, their reputations, their sense of normalcy. The noise that once felt deafening now left them with emptiness. And yet, in that emptiness, there was a strange kind of clarity. Mendeecees began realizing that not every broken thing needs fixing. Yandy started to see that sometimes love means letting go, not out of anger, but out of mercy for yourself and for the person you once loved. Sierra, in her own way, learned that silence can protect you, but it can also isolate you. As the dust settled, all three found themselves standing at different corners of the same story, connected by pain, separated by truth, and forever changed by what the world had witnessed. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered, reminding them that some endings don't come with closure, they just come with acceptance. Months later, when the noise had finally died down and people had moved on to fresher scandals, fate decided to twist the story one more time. Mendeecees and Yandy ended up at the same charity gala in New York, a public event neither of them had planned to attend together. It wasn't supposed to be a reunion, yet the universe clearly had other plans. The atmosphere was elegant, with cameras flashing and soft jazz echoing through the room. But when their eyes met across the crowd, everything else disappeared. It was as if time had folded back to the moment before everything fell apart. Mendeecees froze, unsure whether to approach her, while Yandy's heart raced as she tried to look calm. She had imagined seeing him again 1,000 times, each version ending differently, some with anger, others with tears, but now that he was there, she couldn't find the words. Mendeecees finally gathered the courage to walk over. "Hey," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of months of silence. "Hey," she replied, her smile small but genuine. For a few seconds, they just stood there, awkwardly suspended between the past and the present. Then, unexpectedly, they laughed a nervous, nostalgic laugh that broke the tension instantly. "We really made a mess, didn't we?" Yandy said. Mendeecees nodded. "Yeah, a beautiful disaster." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. There was no bitterness, just tired sincerity. They talked quietly, away from cameras, about everything that had happened, the leaks, the silence, the heartbreak. Mendeecees admitted he had hated her at one point, not because of what she did, but because she still had such a hold over him. Yandy confessed that she had blamed herself every day for losing someone she still cared about deeply. For the first time, they spoke without trying to win. There were no accusations, no defenses, just two broken people trying to understand how love could turn into chaos so fast. "Do you ever think we could start over?" Mendes asked, not with hope but curiosity. Yandy looked at him for a long time before answering. Maybe not as we were, but maybe as people who finally learned. That line hung between them like fragile peace. They didn't hug, didn't pose for photos, didn't even exchange numbers. But when they parted that night, something felt lighter. The weight of resentment had finally begun to lift. Later, the internet noticed they were at the same event and exploded with theories again. Are they back together? One headline screamed. Secret meeting? Another suggested. But this time, neither of them cared. They didn't correct the rumors, didn't feed the flames. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. Their reunion wasn't about romance, it was about closure, about finding peace in what once caused pain. And maybe that's what real maturity looks like. Being able to look at the person who once broke your heart and no longer see a wound, but a lesson. As Mendes left the event, he glanced back once and saw Yandy smiling at something across the room, radiant and free. For the first time, he didn't feel the ache of loss, he felt gratitude. The story that had started in chaos had finally found its quiet ending. Not in love rekindled, but in love released. In the months that followed their quiet reunion, life began to rebuild itself piece by piece. The chaos that had once consumed Mendes, Yandy, and Sierra became nothing more than distant echoes in a world always hungry for the next scandal. For the first time in a long while, peace didn't feel impossible, it felt earned. Mendes focused on himself, turning his pain into purpose. He started therapy, began writing again, and learned to separate his worth from public opinion. The man who once lived online now found solace in offline moments, morning runs, books, and slow coffee rituals. His posts, when they came, were thoughtful, not reactive. The world noticed his change, and for once it wasn't about drama, it was about growth. Yandy took a different path. She launched a podcast titled Unfiltered Love, where she spoke honestly about healing, forgiveness, and self-worth. Listeners were drawn to her raw honesty. She never played the victim or villain, just a woman who had lived through chaos and found strength in vulnerability. The podcast went viral, not because of scandal, but because people saw truth in her words. She talked about Mendes once, briefly, describing him as a chapter I'll never regret, even if it didn't end the way I imagined. That one sentence was enough to silence all remaining rumors. Sierra, too, reemerged slowly, gracefully. She stayed away from gossip, but returned to her passion projects, working with women in media to raise awareness about digital harassment. Her silence had once made her a mystery. Now her voice made her an advocate. People began to see her not as a scandal, but as someone who had survived one. In a poetic twist, the same internet that once destroyed their reputations now helped them rebuild their identities. Time had done what no apology or statement could have healed. Mendes and Yandy crossed paths again months later at a mutual friend's event. There was no tension this time, just warmth, a shared smile between two people who had finally found peace in separate directions. "You look happy," Mendes said. "I am," Yandy replied. "And I hope you are too." And he was. Not perfectly, not entirely, but enough. The closure they couldn't find in public drama had come quietly, privately, like sunrise after a long storm. The world that had once obsessed over their pain barely remembered the details anymore, and that was the most liberating part. They were free from the narrative. Looking back, each of them had learned something essential. Mendes learned that love without trust is like a song without melody. Yandy learned that forgiveness isn't about others, it's about reclaiming your peace. And Sierra learned that silence can protect, but speaking your truth heals. Together, they had lived through a digital tragedy that mirrored real life, messy, raw, and painfully human. But they had also proven something powerful, that even the most public breakdowns can lead to private rebirths. In the end, there were no winners or losers, just lessons written in heartbreak and resilience. The cameras had moved on, but the people behind the headlines had finally found what they had been chasing all along, not fame, not revenge, but peace. And sometimes that's the real ending, the one no one posts about, but everyone hopes for.